Hello everybody, it's Mr. G and welcome back once again to Misconceptions in History, and we are doing the third part of the last battleships, and that is the Yamato Class. Probably one of the more anticipated ones we're going to do, with the Iowa probably being the biggest one I do. So let's go ahead and get started on basically the largest battleship ever built. So once again I bring up this comparison chart that I had in the last video, and I wanted to compare the Iowa to the Yamato. And I know looking at this you immediately see that the Iowa actually looks bigger, and I said the Yamato was the largest class of battleship ever built. And in terms of length, yes, the Iowa is longer. However, in terms of gross tonnage, the Iowa class is only 58,000 tons against the Yamato 72,000 tons. To put that weight difference into some perspective, that's the equivalent of about 7 Fletcher-class destroyers. So let's go ahead and get started on how the Japanese arrived at the Yamato-class battleship. Let's start off at Japanese development of battleships during World War I, and they actually went through several classes. The Issei class, the Nagato class were extremely popular for their development, and these were the mainstay of the Japanese Navy until the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922. And in all honesty, next to the Germans, the Japanese really got it the worst in terms of the naval treaty bans, and they saw their navy decrease the most. Now, the ban not only hurt them in terms of what ships they already had, but also their future developments, like the Tosa-class battleships, which were going to be the future of the Japanese Navy. And instead, what ended up happening is they had to cancel the development of these ships. The design was actually be used in the Amagi-class battlecruisers, and while they had actually started building one, they ended up converting it to an aircraft carrier instead. This battleship would become Kaga aircraft carrier, and this aircraft carrier would be extremely important to the Japanese in terms of developing their doctrine for air combat against battleships, and was part of the fleet that launched the attack on Pearl Harbor and would eventually be sunk in 1942. And we'll go into more detail on that when I do aircraft carriers in the future. Now, a later battleship that was supposed to be developed but wasn't because of the Washington Naval Treaty was the number 13 class, and this was going to be the real big, heavy battleships for the Japanese. It would have been the first Japanese battleship to incorporate 18-inch guns, something that would be later seen on the Yamato class. And had these ships been allowed to be created, they probably would have outdone any European battleship of the day. Now, because of the Washington Naval Treaty, the Japanese had to rely on the Issei and Nagato class until the late 30s, when the Yamato class came around. When the first ship in the class, the Yamato, was finished, it essentially became the largest battleship ever, with 73,000 tonnage and being fitted with 9 18.1-inch guns. Not only was it the heaviest, it carried the largest caliber weapons ever put on a ship. To put the size of these ships in a better perspective, when the Yamato sister ship, the Musashi, was launched, the massive amount of ship that entered into the bay it was launched in was so large, it actually caused a tidal wave and flooded the town that it was launched up against. Now, the reason for these absolutely massive ships being built was it was part of the Japanese doctrine at the time, which was an expansionist movement. The Japanese felt that they needed to grow and expand in order to succeed, in order to maintain their way of life. And they needed the ability to support that. And so they created these absolutely massive ships. Now, there were supposed to be 5 of them. They only managed to build 2 of them. Additionally, the Japanese were aware that they could be outproduced by countries like the United States. So they needed to build a ship that could compete with the Americans, maybe not on an industrial scale, but in a, weight to weight, caliber to caliber scale. Now, I do want to take a minute to discuss the fates of both the Yamato and the Musashi. Of course, the Yamato being the more famous of the one is the one I'm going to talk about first. Now, the Yamato served from December 16, 1941 until August 31st, 1945. And it actually participated in multiple famous battles that occurred. Battle of Midway, Battle of the Philippine Sea, Battle of Leyte Gulf. It was part of the Taffy 3 fight, the Battle of Samar, so it was actually involved in multiple conflicts. However, during the Battle of Okinawa, it was sent on a one-way mission, a suicide run, basically to protect the island. The plan had been to sail the ship at full speed to Okinawa, beach itself, and basically turn itself into a battery to prevent any incoming ships from reaching the shoreline of Okinawa. However, during the fighting, It actually was attacked by submarines and aircraft and would be hit on April the 7th and sunk, with the Japanese officially striking it from the record on August 31st. While there was some debate over the wreckage of the Yamato, it was positively identified in 2019, lying about 1,100 feet under the ocean. The Musashi did not have as a stoic a career as the Yamato. It was commissioned in 1942. However, it kind of did a lot of island hopping, made several sorties to find American fleets but didn't succeed. It was present during the Battle of the Philippine Sea and at Leyte Gulf. However, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Musashi was actually hit by an estimated 19 torpedoes and 17 direct bomb strikes from American carrier-based aircraft and was sunk on October 24, 1944. Now, the wreckage of the Musashi was actually discovered by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen in 2015 after 8 years of searching for her, and she lies about 3,000 feet beneath the sea. Now, there actually was a third Yamato Class battleship being developed. However, because of time constraints and resources, it was actually converted into an aircraft carrier partway through its development, and it became the Shinano. And while the legacy of the Yamato Class should end there, it technically doesn't, because of the A-150 class Super Yamato. Now, the Super Yamato was supposed to be built immediately after the completion of the Yamato Class battleships, and its main improvement was, of course, overall in large size, but it was actually supposed to be equipped with 20-inch guns, which would have made it even more powerful than the Yamato. However, the Japanese decided that building aircraft carriers and a fleet of smaller support ships were more important, and the Super Yamato never went off the drawing board. And as you can imagine, that could have been a major game changer for the war and for the Japanese. But that's it for today. There you have a brief history on the Yamato Class and how the Japanese arrived on the Yamato Class. If you'd like me to do more in detail one day, I have no problem just strictly looking at the Yamato and the Musashi and not the history beforehand. But that's it for today. Next week, look forward to the Iowa Class, and we're going to talk about what was going to happen after the Iowa Class. But I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you all in the next time.